Senator, if you were in a debate with President Trump and you could ask him one question, what would you ask?
I think my question would be, does he pledge to obey the law? Because to me, that has been one of the biggest problems with this president, is that he keeps undermining the law in this country. He keeps undermining his own attorney general, the former attorney general. He keeps undermining the Mueller investigation, which is a major investigation focused on a foreign country trying to intervene in our election. And that, to me, while there are so many things I would love to ask him, and I'm sure we'd love to ask him a number of things about what he's done and why he's done them and why he isn't consistent in his foreign policy, I think this fundamental question and pushing him on his view of the law is important, because what I see, I don't like. A few years ago, I got to go and do the Democratic dinner in Atlanta, Georgia. And when I was there, I went to the Carter Museum, the Presidential Library, for Jimmy Carter. And I was the only Minnesota geek there that started to look for all the Mondale stuff, right? I'm like, where's Joan's dress from the inauguration? But in any case, I looked down the wall as I looked for this Mondale stuff, and there was this quote from Walter Mondale. It was after they'd served for 4 years, and he was looking back at their time after they'd lost the election. And the quote said, "We obeyed the law, we told the truth, we kept the peace." We obeyed the law, we told the truth, we kept the peace. And I think that is the minimum that we should expect from a president, and that is what I pledge to do for you. Thank you.
CNN's Democratic Presidential Town Hall with Senator Amy Klobuchar. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to CNN's Democratic Presidential Town Hall with Senator Amy Klobuchar. So let's get right into the question again. John Burroughs is a healthcare consultant from Glenn. John?
Hey, John?
Thank you, Senator. Currently, our national immigration policy is focusing on a false message of border security. How would you address the root cause of the problem, which is that unskilled Americans are afraid of skilled immigrants taking their high-paying jobs away from them?
Okay. I would probably describe it in a different way, and I'll start with that. First of all, I think that President Trump has tried to distract us and focus on just one part of this issue. And that's an issue. You want to make sure you have border security. To me, this is an economic issue for our country. And we have always been a country that is built by immigrants, right? We all have our stories in America. And I believe that immigrants don't diminish America, that they are America. That means, to me, that we need to have comprehensive immigration reform, something I've long supported. And I view this, first of all, if you look around our country, something like around 70 of our Fortune 500 CEOs, this was a few years back, were immigrants. 25% of our U.S. Nobel laureates were born in other countries, right? That's a pretty amazing thing. We have immigrants that have built this country. And so comprehensive immigration reform is a mix of things. It was security money, but it was also about a path to citizenship. And we passed that in the Senate on a bipartisan basis, and then it got stuck in Paul Ryan's freezer somewhere next to the frozen peas. I don't know, it just got stuck there. And so we need to bring this back and start talking about it in that way. Because right now, all we're hearing when it comes to immigration is hate-filled rhetoric. And I'm sure you've heard some of it in New Hampshire. We've certainly seen it nationally. I'll end with this one story of a family in Minnesota, of a Somali-American family who went out to dinner with their 2 little kids. And they're out to dinner, and this guy walks by. And he looks at them and says, "You 4 go home. You go home to where you came from." And the little girl looks up at her mom, and she says, "Mom, I don't want to go home to eat. You said we should eat dinner out tonight." You think of the words of that innocent child. She only knows one home, and that's my state. That's probably your state. That's the United States of America. And we need to get back, cross the river of our divides, and get to that place again in our country.
William Hatch is here, and he is at the New Hampshire State Legislature.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Senator. Thank you for taking my question, and welcome to New Hampshire.
Thank you.
Do you think the current
A
administration...
very active state legislature.
You fit well, yes.
You have a lot of people in it. I know that.
We have a good time, though.
Yes.
Senator, do you think our current administration's relationship with our allies has been damaged? If so, with whom and how? Also, what do you consider the most important and urgent foreign affairs issues, and what's your plan to address them? Thank you.
Thank you. It has certainly been damaged. You think of the work of diplomacy and all of that work that President Obama did and Secretary Clinton, Secretary Kerry. That's reaching out to our allies. And I believe that we must stand tall as a beacon of democracy, but I also believe that we must stand with our allies. So that's my number one focus. Secondly, we have to invest in diplomacy. I remember it was Secretary Mattis who unfortunately left the Trump administration after the president's basically made that decision on removing the troops from Syria without even notifying our allies, without notifying his own people. Well, Secretary Mattis once said that if you don't invest in foreign aid and you don't invest in diplomacy, then he just has to buy more bullets, right? And so we've got to look at it as just not one side or the other, but how we deal with the world as a whole. The other thing I'd mention is just modernizing our military. I took on the issue of protecting our elections from after what we saw happen in the last election with Russia. And I would actually put this right up there. When I talk to our military, a lot of, in addition to, of course, the Mideast and making sure that Iran, and I disagreed with the decision about getting out of that nuclear agreement. I think that would have been an example of standing with our allies in Europe and pushing Iran to make sure that they never have a nuclear weapon. Well, when you look at the other issue, it is cyber. And that is the next arena for warfare. We're already seeing it right now. And just to give you an example, the bill that I had to upgrade our election equipment cost, literally, bipartisan bill, 3% of one aircraft carrier. So working with our allies, investing in diplomacy, modernizing our military, and then finally taking on those big challenges that are in front of us. And I would list them as what we've already mentioned, the Mideast, the challenge that we have with climate change, which is driving so many issues. It is not just out there on its own. It's driving migration from places in Africa and refugees because of the change in our climate. And then, of course, dealing with the nuclear threat that we have with North Korea, as well as what we're seeing with Russia's continuing pushing at our country. And no, I don't think the answer is to stand with Vladimir Putin and say, I agree with everything he says, and oh, hey, I disagree with my own intelligence people. The answer is to stand with strength and stand with our allies.
Christine Carter is a high school teacher from Concord. Go ahead, Christine.
Hi. My high school students are growing up believing that the partisan divide in Congress is normal and insurmountable. They're also hearing that their president can speak and act without filters. In other words, they're growing up to be cynics regarding our American government. How would you intend to help to restore faith in the American system of governance for those who are coming of age under President Trump?
Well, I think the first thing is to stop governing by tweet, okay? And all these mean-spirited messages that makes it hard for teachers to say, you know, you don't have to agree with everything the president says. No one's going to agree with them. But you have to have someone that you have faith in, that respects the institution, that's someone that you can look up to. And from the moment that President Trump was sworn into office, I will never forget that dark day with the clouds coming in, where I sat actually in between Senator McCain, who I miss very much, as well as Senator Sanders. It was the three of us that day. And we were just shocked as the language and the rhetoric got darker and darker. So the answer to me is to reach out instead of just looking down, which we want to do all the time, right? You see this news on TV, you don't want your kids to see it. Instead of looking down or looking away, we have to look at each other, and we have to look up at the challenges before us. We have always done this as a great nation. This is everything from income inequality to healthcare to the challenges that we have with our democracy. I believe that we are better than this. I believe we can move forward, and the only way we do it is if we do it together and cross that river of our divides.